We are now going live right now.
We're just going to wait until 6 o'clock to get started, and then we'll jump right in. And is the presentation that you're going to share the one that's on the board agenda for this evening?
Yes, it is. I was only
Okay.
going to share slides 13 tonight, or talk about 13 through 17.
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to follow along on my computer screen here, so I just wanted to check that it was the same. Okay.
We can go through, start at the beginning if you want, or just focus on the reduction.
No, why don't we focus on the reductions? I think for the most part, the people on the call have an understanding, at the very least, of the broad contours of the budget. So just focusing on some discussion around the reductions for those interested, I think will probably be the best use of our time right now. All right, there it is. So now that we're at 6 o'clock, this was the time designated for our Business Functions Committee meeting that we have monthly at this point. So this evening, we're going to be discussing and reacting to a presentation by the school district's Director of Finance and Operations, Ann Guidish. And we'll also be discussing with other administrators some of the reductions that the administration has produced at the direction of the board. And that discussion will likely continue into the board meeting this evening, but I think we have an opportunity to explore any questions we have around these reductions. So Ann, I'll turn it over to you. If you want to actually give your correct title, because I don't think I gave your correct title, quick.
Director of Finance and Support Operations.
I missed it.
Okay, these budget reduction items, proposals are separated out into elementary, secondary, and other, and then we'll talk about things that we'll be looking at in the future that still need evaluation. At the elementary level, regular part-time classroom aides, the recommendation to reduce all of the K-6 part-time aides days by an hour. What we have found, due to the way classes are scheduled at the elementary level, because of specials and what other, recess, they were spending quite a bit of time doing clerical work, doing copying, and that's really not the point of funding aides, instructional aides. They're there to support the students and support the teachers. So a cost-saving measure would be to reduce by an hour, $105,000 less in wage and net benefit costs. As I mentioned, principals, we've discussed this with them. They would schedule their days so that they're coming in at times where they can provide direct support. Library aides. There are other staff in the building, computer aides. They're already helping the librarians a lot with research. So they could, existing staff could serve the purpose of us doing what the current library aides are. That's $24,500 in savings. Riften, there's a part-time school counseling secretary. And looking at the staffing in Owatton, the student enrollment is, maybe 20 less than what's at Riften. Riften has 2 counselors. Owatton has 1. So for equity purposes and for looking for ways to save costs and knowing that it's possible to support counselors in other buildings, that don't have as many counselors, this was recommended as part-time. So that's $12,900. Non-essential budget impact items. Owatton and Lorraine principals requested student furniture be replaced while the furniture is aging. At this point, it's deemed non-essential and we'll defer it to a future year. That's $35,700. Are there any questions on this slide? Moving on to the secondary proposals, the senior high emotional support teacher position will not be filled. The services will be provided by other special education staff in the building. That's an $89,000 reduction in expense for wage and benefit. A junior high English language arts teacher has resigned and the proposal is not to fill that. This will require schedule changes and the impact is $106,000 less. We also discussed removing budget impact items that are not essential at this point with the secondary principals, and most of these items relate to items that the music department requested, and that's $27,000 less in minor equipment. I just want to mention the senior high had already removed some other building requests that related to facility, but we've already taken that out in a prior budget scenario. Are there any questions about the slide?
And could you, sorry, go ahead, John.
My finger wasn't fast enough on the previous slide to unmute. The furniture, there's nothing there that's someone would deem unsafe. Something that has a leg that's broken or a back that's insecure. Did anybody take a look at the furniture just to make sure that we're not forcing children to sit on furniture that's going to cause injury?
In my discussions with the principals, while they, in their initial requests back in the fall, point to the aging and some pieces may be failing, but my recent discussions, in their list of priorities, this furniture can wait. So our staff, maintenance staff, can repair if needed, but the principals have weighed in on this and they are supportive of removing it from the 2021 budget.
Okay, good, thank you.
And on the reductions in secondary expenditures, and then if Patrick or Bob, if you guys want to jump in here as well, can you maybe give me some insight into what type of schedule changes we're talking about with the not filling of the junior high school ELA teacher?
Sure. My conversation with Mr. Flam, the teacher, the ELA teacher, that position would not be filled. There had been some of the language teachers that had taken a section or two of English as well. So in our discussions, he was to look at his schedule as a way to modify the exploratory languages to allow those teachers to pick up more English sections.
Okay, thank you.
Other expense reductions, most immediate, the healthcare premium increase. The health trust reduced the increase from 5.5% to 2%, impact of $276,000. That was a welcome piece of news last week. The next item, a reduction in budget assumptions. Maybe you realize that when you are building a budget and you're negotiating 2 large bargaining unit contracts, you have to build in assumptions. And the assumptions that were built in were based on comparative increases in other districts, guidance from our bargaining council. And at this point, I'm bringing those numbers down that are in line with what I believe the target will be that the negotiating teams want to end up at, but it's imperative that we stick to those targets and not end up settling on more than is in the budget. So that is 153,000 reduction wage and related benefit costs. The third item is the business manager secretary position retirement. We haven't received the official letter, but she is retiring. And that will be reduced to a 4.5-hour position, 181 days per year. And we have been working on a plan of decentralizing some of her duties across the district and also around in central administration. This is all part of the, obviously we have embarked on this budget reduction initiative for a while, and it's really going to come down to, controlling the structural deficit, which is wage and benefits. So whatever way, even when someone retires, that we're able to change the way we do work or have people do more work. So while it's not a lot of money, it is a $58,000 reduction in wage and benefits. Our K-12 literacy coach was locally funded in the 1920 budget. Title II funds can fund this, partially fund this position. So funds that were earmarked for staff development, we are changing that budget so that it will fund coach position. So therefore, staff PD will be greatly reduced for 2021 by 60,000. Supply cost across the board, 10%. Staff buildings had already met the goal of not to exceed a 10% increase over the prior year budget, and some were even less than that. And while I'm not a big proponent of across the board cuts because everything's not created equal. So we have to be very careful as this is applied, but we're in a situation now with the reduction in local revenues that we really are going to have to cut back even more. And I believe we can handle 10% or 120,000 without really impacting the resources that students need or teachers need. Additional capital asset deferrals. In speaking with Joe Way, we can delay the security cameras. It was at a Watton and the senior high. And again, recognizing we don't do it in 2021, and we're just deferring it to following year, or there's a potential to do it out of capital reserve. But in addition to clock systems, it was a combination PA clock, and we're just going to do the PA system. So the total of those reductions, 90,000. Then a recent facility committee or business function, I don't remember which one, we talked about reducing the line item for improvements in the general fund from 312,000 to 212,000. We did that, but we left in a discretionary capital budget for items that may occur. And at this point, I'm proposing to pull that out of the general fund. If something happens that we need to address of a smaller capital project nature, then the go-to would be capital reserve. And then the reserve, we've had 300,000 in budget reserve. This is very common with school districts. A lot of them have a lot more. Special education situations, one student could cost you over 100,000 if you hadn't anticipated the placement. So right now we're reducing it from 300,000 to 200,000, a reduction of 100,000. Any questions?
And on the reduction of the budgetary reserves for special education costs, can you kind of speak to maybe the efficacy? I'm not sure if that's the right word, of having a separate budgetary reserve for this specific area rather than utilizing our general fund balance?
Well, when you adopt a budget, a general fund budget is a total expenditure number, and you cannot exceed that. You're looking like you have to exceed it, then you have to open up your budget again. So it's adopted. You cannot exceed your appropriations. And that is why school districts have a line item budgetary reserve. And it is for things like special education costs, but it also could be for something like a major repair to a chiller. It could be, or plumbing. I mean, those things can be quite costly as well. It could be for a need, for example, August comes along and Rifton gets 20 students coming in to 5th grade and we need a teacher. So this is where the funds would come from.
In the past, have we ever, I think what I heard you say is that our previous amount was 300,000. Have we ever exceeded that in a previous year?
No.
Okay.
All right, so that totals 1.3 million approximately. Our revised expenditure number for 2021 is 79.4 million approximately. So looking at potential expense reductions, short-term, long-term. Now, as I mentioned, these items need to be evaluated further. They've been under discussion. Need to look at the impact on program. So extracurricular, we have just talked about raising the fee. That is, we're still discussing that in light of the hardship on the economic impact on families. I really don't know in our community exactly how our families have been impacted, but I'm sure quite a few are. So raising a fee may not be the best thing to do at this point. Further reducing classroom aid time. Again, you're just doubling your savings if you do that. Across the board cuts to 20%. Some districts are taking this type of action. I mean, where business managers have calls during the week, and we are kind of pulling our hair out on how we're going to reduce costs. We're looking at instructional software. There was a survey conducted, and the results of that, the survey on usefulness of software, and the staff filled out the survey. Maybe Patrick can chime in on this one, but there are areas that we can reduce by not renewing because they are not used as much as we would like them to be used.
So I think it was really after a business functions committee meeting earlier in the year, we talked a little bit about return on investment and taking a look at our instructional software in particular, and what did the return on investment look like with those particular products. And so we did put together a survey. We surveyed our teachers around the different instructional resources that we're using and essentially whether or not we're getting the bang for the buck. And we are taking a look at several of those. There are some that we're using pretty consistently and have been using for several years now. The Renaissance Star products, which we continue to evaluate. Some of them may make sense moving forward. Others, like Accelerated Reader, may not. We're also taking, we've got math software that we use, IXL and IXL and Dreambox. But really, kind of outside of those products, some of the other products are smaller. Some of them are free. Some of them we're taking a look at. But this is something that'll really be ongoing. We'll take a look at it every year. And I think it's something we'll continue to kind of chip away at and make sure that the digital products that we are using, we're using pervasively and with a purpose, so that we're not just continuing to spend on more resources unnecessarily.
The next item is looking at reducing a full-time hourly employee's hours per day from 8 hours to 7.5, from 7.5 to 7, while not impacting the support, the services that they offer. And doing that across the board for our full-time hourly 12-month employees and 10-month. That could be a savings of $130,000 wages and retirement and Social Security. Again, the common practice in a lot of districts is doing RFPs to look at contracting out support and management staff. If this structural deficit and the lack of state funding continues, and if our employer contribution rate with PSERS goes up as a result of the impact of COVID-19, then we're going to have to look at all options. In addition, contracting out athletic trainer services, there could be an opportunity there based on data we've looked at from a couple of our Berks County districts who contract out those services. We need to evaluate a potential reduction in administrative staffing. Finally, exploring and evaluating our K-12 programs and altering it in a way that we're still providing a basic quality education for our students, but in order to reduce wages, benefits, you have to look at reduction in staff. Looking at such things as K-4 strings program at the elementary. It's desired, but there's no standards. Electives, base it on classes size at the senior high, and then junior high, look at the offerings. They have they really have, they're fortunate to have so many things to choose from, world languages, computer apps. So this is going to be, in terms of short term, we're going to start looking at it at the beginning of 2021. But the impact will be seen, whatever's decided upon in a future budget year. And that's it for these budget reduction slides.
And can I just get you to elaborate maybe on our use of overtime hours for support staff employees? This is an area, I guess, that's kind of new to me. So I'm just wondering if you can maybe give some context around the use and how much that represents.
The overtime hours that I was really thinking about here, and it's one of those areas where to evaluate the impact on the safety of our buildings, is custodians can do building checks on the weekend and they receive time and a half for that. So that would be the biggest area. When they're doing an event on the weekend to cover, we bill groups that are using the building on the weekend. On occasion, obviously when we have snow removal, they incur overtime. There's nothing really we can do about that. I was really targeting, okay, can we cut back on the number of building checks or just assign it differently? We do incur overtime for mechanics who have to drive because their 8 hours in a day will be exceeded, if they have to drive a route when our regular drivers are not available. As far as clerical staff, it's mainly compensatory time, but it doesn't occur that often. But again, going back to the building check, it's not a big number, but that's what that refers to.
And for those building checks, are those at the direction of their supervisors, or can they do that on their own accord?
It's at the direction of the supervisor. They're scheduled.
So we're scheduling overtime shifts on the weekends for building checks.
Right, and it really only
Okay.
amounts to an hour and a half. I think that's the call-in, right? So the risk there is if something goes wrong in the building, for example, if the power goes out and no one recognizes it over the weekend, then we have an issue Monday morning. But, you know, we talked about it, you know, not all school districts do them, but it could, you know, to scale it back a bit, it's a possibility. And I don't have a number for that.
Okay. Was there any discussion amongst the principals that the principals could do that? Because I'm guessing if, you know, the power were to trip over the weekend, one of the things that the custodians would be looking for to see if the generator is running. Maybe I'm not seeing the full picture there, but, you know, it's my understanding that we have principals that are oftentimes at the buildings over the weekends.
Right, and they do recognize certain things, you know, on occasion if it happens. So again, as I mentioned, these things require more evaluation,
Okay.
but I was more, the bigger savings here would be in reducing hours, the regular hours. That was the 130,000 I referred to. If everybody was reduced by 30 minutes.
And I have a question about the board supply cuts to 20%. Can I assume that this is for the 2021-22 school year? And is it 20% in addition to the 10% this year, or was it just an additional 10% on top of what we already did this year? If it's implemented next year.
It would be 10%, not making it an additional 20. It would be 10% to make the total 20 across 2 years.
Okay.
Anne,
Mhm.
I'm curious why it is that we haven't already evaluated a potential reduction in administrative staffing.
Well, to give you a little history, at certain points, I've been through this recession thing since 2008-9, and we did reduce by our math supervisor and our ELA supervisor for a while. And then we found deficiencies, and then they came back on. You know, the positions that have been added in the terms of like assistants, they were to fill, or there were deficiencies, and you know, and the analysis was done that we needed these additional supports. Now, if you're asking me why we haven't done it so far this year, I think COVID-19 is really has brought this from the back burner to probably the front burner. You know, when, for example, you know, principals or assistant principals move on, we always ask the question, do we need this assistant principal at the junior high, for example, based on the numbers? Do we need assistant principal at Rifton based on the numbers? Life has really changed in public education, and because of student behaviors, because of the needs of parents. So we do talk about it, and having certain levels of administrative staff, and in keeping with all the demands for testing, for even the demands in my department on reporting in annual audits, and I don't think there's any one of us that is trying to figure out, well, gee, I don't have anything to do. I mean, we're all, in my opinion, really stretched to the limit. But again, we do have to go back and look at it and just have to deal with it. I mean, that's all I can say. I mean, yeah, that's all I can say.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Does anybody know when the assistants started coming into the picture? I mean, let me give you a point of reference, which will reveal my age or approximate age, and that's okay. I graduated from Exeter in 1970. We had a superintendent, we had a high school principal, and we had a junior high school principal. So when between 1970 and now, if there's a historian among us, when do those assistants start populating school districts?
You've probably been here the longest, Ann.
I'm sorry?
No, I'm saying Ann has probably been here the longest. So if anybody would have a historical view, it would be Ann.
Well, since I've been with the district, there's been an assistant at the junior high, and there was an assistant at the senior high. I don't remember exactly how many years ago we added a second assistant at the senior high. It's been quite some time that we've added that, and some of it had to do with an increase in enrollment, going from going two classes of at one point in time 350 per class. So that's a big driver, and trying to control what goes on in the building and discipline. As far as the elementary, again, that had to do with numbers at 5-6. We did have one at Owatton, but with numbers going down, that position person resigned, it was not filled. So.
Okay, thank you.
I think too, it's also kind of important to recognize that there are some positions that we haven't filled. I mean, a couple of years ago, Don Kramer left, and he was, I don't know if we called him a administrative assistant for pupil services and administrative services, but his position wasn't filled. And we had an opportunity to hire I think a coordinator or supervisor of virtual programs. And that position was left unfilled. So, I think, there have been situations where we feel that, some of these positions and the absence of these positions has been detrimental, and it has to complete and full operation of the district. But, I think over the time we found that there are ways that people, fill the gaps. But I still think that there are things that we miss, at times, and having a full complement of administrative team, I think is important in ways that you really only fully appreciate it until a person is gone. I think the assistants have become even more critical in the buildings over the years, simply because of the amount of administrative requirements that are imposed on our schools and our buildings, and they perform invaluable services, and probably not the least of which is the discipline and the management of students, which is ongoing. So I think I like the idea though of trying to step back, take a look at it in a very comprehensive way, establish some goals for next year, you know, and try to take the year to kind of see how this might impact our budget going into 21-22, recognizing there could be some long-term implications of what we're dealing with this COVID-19 virus.
Okay, thank you.
Can I say something about the administrative stuff? I'm a retired junior high principal, and I went a couple months without an assistant. There is no way you could do the job without an assistant principal in the junior high school. And there's no, the high school needs to have 2 assistant principals. There's no question in my mind. The demands anymore, just with regards to mental health of students, school safety, the increase in evaluations that are involved in school administration. There's no way one person could do the junior high or 2 people could do the high school. It would be impossible. I guess that was a showstopper. Everyone stopped.
No, I think that's a good point, Greg. I mean, things change over time. You know, our world has become more complicated. The mandates, I think one of the things that the BCIU has provided for us is the list of mandates that we're required to fulfill, and it just keeps growing and growing. I think, what did they say, Dr. Phillips, was it maybe 90 or so mandates that we're currently actively, you know, impacting upon?
Majority unfunded, and the majority of them all in the last few years.
Yeah, since maybe 2000, I guess it was, wasn't it, or 2010?
2005, something like that. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, it's unless you're actually, you know, in there day to day and to see what these folks have to do, I think Mr. Gaultier is right. I mean, you know, to try to do these jobs single-handedly would be a nightmare.
Hey, can you give an example or 2 of these unfunded mandates?
What I can do is provide you with the BCIU document. It's a really fantastic document. They put a lot of work into it, but it kind of identifies all the mandates that are imposed on districts. So off the top of my head, I really can't, you know, right now. I mean, there are some that obviously are very clear and obvious. Maybe Dr. Phillips has some, but I mean, like Act 44 is a good example.
Tremendous amount of work that has gone on.
Yeah.
You know, as mentioned, the different types of evaluations and the observations that have to take place, not only from the tenured teachers, but 4 times the amount for the non-tenured teachers. All the different types of professional development now that has to be done. And as a district, we do a lot of that in-house. So there needs to be that portion that's controlled. You know, the mental health was mentioned. Yeah, there's just a tremendous amount of ideas that the legislators have, and they put it into action, they shove it down to the school districts, and there's no funding that comes along with it. So, you know, as mentioned, the staff that you have currently does more and more work. And, you know, again, as was mentioned, to pull one of the people out of the high school or one of the 2 out of the junior high, you know, case in point, Mr. Flam was without his assistant for a while. And I'm sure he would echo what Mr. Gaultier said. It is just, it's a bear, and it really is.
And these mandates are mandated by whom or by what?
The legislature down in Harrisburg.
Oh, okay. So
Some federal as well.
To be fair, some federal.
And
okay.
Mr. Fiddler, 2 that are kind of curricular in nature that I can just kind of think of as we're talking here. One was the CPR mandate. You know, there is now a mandate that CPR instruction be woven into the health and PE curriculum, which I think is a great mandate. Don't get me wrong. I'm not against it in any way, but that was put out there. There wasn't any sort of additional funding to support districts in making that happen. Now, Exeter's got an incredibly strong health and PE department, great teacher leadership, and we had many of those components woven in already, but there were a number of districts that had to scramble to meet that one. Another one that comes to mind is the civics assessment. PDE decided that it was going to be a requirement that there be a civics assessment at some point to measure students' overall civics knowledge. Again, a very worthwhile pursuit, very, very valuable endeavor, but no real guideline or guidance in terms of what the assessment should look like. They basically said you can use aspects of the citizens exam, you can make your own. It was very much, LEA driven. And so that was something else that principals had to work with teachers and district folks to make happen. So those are just two examples that come to mind for me. There are many, many others. But there isn't a year that goes by where we don't get 3 to 5 new ones, be they federal or local, state.
Thank you. That's very helpful, because I didn't know what they were. What is the, you might consider stopping at a stop sign a mandate. And if you don't do it and a policeman spots you, you get a ticket. How are these mandates enforced? Is there some sort of audit that's done each year to make sure that school districts are following them?
We do have, again, I forgot about all the testing that we have to do as well, but we do have an inordinate amount of reports that have to go to Harrisburg. So yes, there is an audit, if you will,
Okay.
keep tabs on what we have to do, when we have to do it.
Got it. Okay. That's very, very helpful. Thank you.
So quickly to shift gears, because I want to try and wrap up in the next 10 minutes or so. I'm wondering from any of those on the call here, whether they're community members or board members, if there are concerns with any of the cuts that have been identified in one of two ways, whether that concern is to a point of saying, I don't know if I could support this, or a concern that you'd like to share about how we don't want to sustain a cut like this over a long period of time. Because I think both exist here. I think we all recognize that we're in some challenging times and we're needing to make challenging decisions that are very, very challenging. I don't know how else to describe it. So I'm just wondering if I can hear some feedback about that. And then before we wrap, I do want to make
Oh, you blipped out.
I have one concern, and it's the high school emotional support teaching position. Now, I'm not familiar with.
I apologize for this, but if you can just keep your comments to about a minute or 2 minutes, please.
I was talking about the high school emotional support position. I'm not sure how you're going to provide support. I'm not familiar with the special education staff, but I think if you're looking at using itinerants, the kids that are involved in emotional support program are not going to get enough support, and you very well could end up seeing them being in alternative placements. So you end up not really saving money. It could end up costing you money. I'm not, like I said, I'm not familiar if that's how you're going to be supporting them. But my experience was mental health issues were becoming more and more of a problem as I got further along in my career. And with this virus, I think we're going to see even more now. So I'm not sure that's the best place to cut. I know you guys are up against it, so it's not a criticism, but if I see one flaw in this, that would be the flaw I would see.
Patrick or Bob, do you want to address that quickly, please?
Well, what I can say is this position is one of 3 at the high school, and it is used as a classroom where the students can be sent for some extra help, if you will, some pre-teaching, some reteaching, some, if you want to call it, time to cool off. The position was vacated by the teacher actually becoming our assistant at the Reifton building. And in the meantime, the high school principal and the secondary supervisor of special education were tasked with evaluating the position. Is there a need to bring it back or not? We actually had a discussion, I want to say late winter, early spring, And their recommendation was we did not need to have the position. It could be utilized in a different manner other than as it was originally structured. So the position was not going to be brought back on the recommendation of the administration of the building, but then they actually came to me and came up with an idea that they would utilize this position in a beginnings of a co-teaching model. That program would have this teacher going into the regular ed classrooms and actually co-teaching or teaching side by side with a regular education teacher. So this position, as we say, we're not providing the emotional support teaching position. It was deemed not necessary, that we could get through it with the other two emotional support teachers. And we were going to use this to start a co-teaching model. And in the times we're in, we decided that we can let that wait.
And like I said, I didn't know what your staffing situation is, so you're still able to address with two teachers.
Absolutely. No. I hear you. Hey, I'm a original special ed teacher, director of pupil services, special ed supervisor, the whole gamut. I was critical. Did we have enough support there? So I let them to, decide. They came back and said, we can make it work without it. We weren't going to have the position filled. But then I also, I am a very big proponent of co-teaching. So when they came to me and said, hey, look, we want to start co-teaching at the high school. We're already doing some of that at our junior high. We could utilize this position for that. I supported it. That's the way we were going to work it for next year. But at this point, in the situations we're in, we'll push back our co-teaching model at the high school.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Excellent question.
Any other concerns that board members or community members want to raise?
I'm just curious how far apart you are now.
Far apart from
you've cut some more costs. So revenue versus expenses, are you going to have a balanced budget with these cuts?
And no.
With no tax increase, we're at a deficit of 3.4 million at this point, if we implement all these immediate cuts.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other concerns that board members or community members want to raise?
I mean, I have concerns, but I don't have concerns that would lead me to disagree with anything that I've seen. We're in a tough position right now. These are difficult decisions that we have to make. I think we've enlisted the support of our administrative team, and they've done a great job, I think, of really laying out the options, for us. And I think it's important for us as a board to really listen to what they're suggesting and see how we can put this into a comprehensive budget that makes the most sense for our community. So I do want to thank the administrative team for their extra efforts in putting this together. This is very difficult to do, and it requires a lot of many choices. I'm sure they looked at many variables, and this is what has risen, I think, to the surface in terms of what we may be able to live with. So thanks, guys.
No, I appreciate that, David. And I can second that. The administrative team was fantastic throughout this whole process. A lot of hard decisions, a lot of good discussion. But as you say, nobody wants to make these decisions, but we all understand the position we're in. We all had a pretty in-depth discussion about if we're going to do cuts, how deep can we go? Again, the idea was to try and preserve best we can program. I think we've done it with this. Again, we really looked at this as a one-year budget. We were tasked at 80 million. We got deeper than that. We're coming in at about 600,000 less. I'm not sure from hearing from Ann earlier this afternoon that the revenue coming in may still present a problem to even the cuts that we made. But I think we all realize that this isn't an easy thing to do. But it's a necessity at this point.
Do we have any other concerns that board members want to raise at this point?
I don't have a concern. I kind of share what Dave just said. I'd rather not see positions cut, because they were in there for a reason. But I do, feel the same way that the administrative team has looked at this very carefully. And I like the way they gave explanations about how it's going to be compensated, like who's going to do what when these hours are reduced or this position is, eliminated. And so I do appreciate all the work that went into that, because I know, you had to do a lot of work, and it wasn't just let's cut here, let's cut there. A lot of thought had to go into that. So I could support this.
I'm the same way myself. This is Shuri. So, I think we just have to almost put ourselves on a wait and see mode in certain cases for certain things. I know we're going to have to definitely tighten our budget, but at the same time, you don't want to have to trouble our school district. We still have a high reputation that we need to maintain. So we just got to just be careful with certain things and make sure that we're doing making the right decisions.
But Ann, did you say we're still going to be more than 3 million short, even with all of these cuts? Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, I did say that. In the board meeting presentation, I'll be showing you further reductions in local revenue. I forget when it was, I guess it was the 14th, I showed about 500,000, and now it's up to around 1.2 million. And that's based on information received from EIT, as well as collection rate. I mean, these are assumptions. I'm trying not to be, trying to be reasonable. And I can explain that later, but that jump of 700,000 or so really kind of, one step forward, 2 steps back.
Ann or John, do you want to add anything?
No, I'm good.
Is Ann still on? Oh, I guess not.
Yeah, I think she jumped off the call.
Okay. Well, I will defer my other point about next steps until my business functions comment during the board meeting, because I want to make sure that all the board members can get into the setup here so we don't have any hiccups. So first of all, I do want to thank Greg for coming on here. Greg, you are our one community member to show up this evening. I know there were more watching on YouTube.
I see
Joe
Joe
Staub joined too, Hunter. Joe Staub
he
joined
did?
too. Yes.
Okay, I saw that he texted me. I thought he might be
There you
watching.
go, Hunter.
Oh, there he is.
There you
I
go.
wanted to be like him.
No, somebody kick him off. Kick him off.
Wow.
I didn't think you needed to see my face.
This is a special treat. We not only get to hear from them, we get to see them.
There we go.
That's St. Joe's
So-
picture on the back wall there? I can't tell.
There they are, both of them, buddy.
The hawk will never die.
Hawk will never die.
So I want to thank you guys for being our community member participants this evening, and I want to thank anybody who is watching live stream on YouTube. It's a helpful tool that we get to be able to have residents comment and also participate in that way. I want to thank the administrators and the board members for coming this evening. We're closing in on a final product, and it has not been easy, and it has been taxing, challenging in a lot of ways. And I think it's going to continue to be that until we get this done, and then we get to start all over next year. But with that being said, I'm very grateful for the work that our administrators have done. There's still more work to do. There's a light at the end of the tunnel. We're coming close, and this is going to be challenging, but we'll get through it. There's more work to be done. And, I think we're all here for the right reason, which is we love this district. We love this community, and we're committed to educating children and inspiring young people. And I think, you know, this is definitely not the budget we want to create, but we are hampered by our circumstances, and we need to realize that there is a long-term picture that we need to honor in this work, and I think we're doing that. So thank you. With that, I'll call the meeting closed, and I hope that anybody who wouldn't be a participant in the next meeting will join us on the live stream. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
All right, good.
Stay safe.